You have to be fully there, and we live in this multitasking world, and you have to listen for deep insight and do proactive listening. It's really powerful. So,
welcome to the Rising Leader Podcast, bringing forth the new wave of rising leadership and helping leaders find purpose, connection, and results. This is your host, founder of Revolutionize, Alex Kremer. What is up, y'all? Welcome back to the Rising Leader Podcast. As always, this is your host, Alex Kremer. The purpose of this show is to bring forth the new wave of rising leadership, whether you have the title or not, and hopefully make you feel a greater sense of purpose, a greater sense of self-connection, connection with others. And oh, by the way, let's drive great results here. And I am very excited about today's guest. It is actually someone who I've been looking forward to for a while, and I'm actually reading his book as well. So first off, Justin Michael, welcome to the show, my friend. It's good to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here. Your name has come up in a lot of my circles for a great place to do retreats and mindset and, business and life. And so it was great meeting you and getting the opportunity to come do this today.
It's funny, in just reading your book, which we'll get into in a second, and just through our conversations, it's like, oh, this guy kind of thinks the way that I think.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at, manifestation, because I talk about it in the book I just did called Attraction Selling. And one of them is like the manufactured manifestation where you go after goals. And that's important in sales, right? Because we have to hit our number. But the other piece is surrendered manifestation. So if you love the books by Michael A. Singer, like Untethered Soul and Surrender Experiment, it's like just seeing what the universe is going to bring you today and what the synchronicities will be and the bridge of incidents. So it's interesting, like how energetically, like I put this out and it just led me to you, or we found each other. So
It's a little bit of letting go, let the divine intelligence of the universe take over. We don't need to figure it all out on our own.
You got it.
Well, Justin, I'm going to give a little background on you and I'll let you fill in the blanks. So you are a 5-time best-selling author. You're the co-founder and CRO of Hard Skill Exchange. Your client acquisition methodology, it's been used by over 200 startups, by over 25,000 reps. Your new book that you mentioned earlier, Attraction Selling, applies the law of attraction that's been seen in things like The Secret, which I know that is part of your story, Think and Grow Rich. And the part that I, really want to dive into here is you bring in a lot of the woo-woo type of stuff while also complementing that with the real business world, right? With tactics, with strategies, with frameworks. So it's not like we're getting lost in this, just go sit on a cushion, for 15 hours a day. We're also saying yes, and apply some skill sets here. So I'm excited to dive into that. So I'll first just say, Justin, did I miss anything about your background? Is there anything else you want to expand on?
No, that's fantastic. I've been doing books now since 2017 and contributing to books. And so, yeah, this was a chance to just create a time capsule and share a unique spin on these, 1,000-year-old themes. So I'm excited to dive into it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to start with The Secret because, even in reading Attraction Selling, you talked about how this was actually a pivotal time in your life when you just got a pretty big download that really started you on this journey of combining that woo-woo type of world, that manifestation, or as you call it, musification or musifestation. I'll let you expand on that one right there. And so, yeah, let's start there. How did it all get started with The Secret?
Yeah, so I'm 44 now, and when I turned 26, I was still somewhat in sales in the music industry, and I was running the door of sort of a music and entertainment club, and I kind of got to do some showcases and bring in some artists, and I actually think even Katy Perry was on the bill before she was discovered. I went back and looked at some old flyers, so I would put on these showcases. Jack Johnson would come down, and it was pretty cool. So eventually, I had this friend who was a certified public accountant, but he was the CPA for Jackson Brown. And the CPA had a daughter, and she was a singer-songwriter, and I helped put on this really awesome show for her debut CD. So just a bit later, there's this, charity event. I got to go there and sit with him at the event, and next to him was like, "Hey, this is my friend Jack Canfield." And I was like, "Okay." And my first response is, "Oh, didn't you write like Chicken Soup for the Soul? Like my 10th grade English teacher made me read that." And that's what I said to him. And he's like, this incredible success principles, motivational speaker, multimillionaire type guy. So then people just got a little hush. I was like, okay. And then I thought, I'm going to ask him a question, because when I would meet notable people, this is just like the selfish era. Like, what can you teach me in a soundbite? And so I was doing a lot of like charity events and doing these rooftop masquerades and things. I was trying to get out there and help people. And I said, "Well, what's the secret to filling an event promotion?" He says, "Well, the whole world is building bigger, better, and faster nets to try to catch the butterflies, and they're spending trillions doing that." He's like, "You need to build the garden that attracts the butterflies." And I was just like, it just kind of, blew up my world. And
Mm.
so I ended up somehow winning like all his books and tapes. And I used to just, ride around Southern California in my Toyota Corolla listening to these tapes. It really did change my life. And one thing he gave me is like, and check this one out. It was an unlabeled DVD. It was like The Secret. So I listened to that, and that was really cool. I watched that movie. And then 6 weeks later, by a crazy bridge of incidents, I actually ended up meeting Rhonda, who wrote it. And I got to spend some time with her, and that's what unlocked, Wallace Wattles' The Science of Getting Rich, which is one of the biggest influences on it from 1910. So she was reading it a lot, and I went out. So I was like, I'm committing to both. So I watched the movie a lot, but I read that book, which is in the public domain, 1,000 times. What could I possibly get at that, right? Bob Proctor he still had his book to the very end of Think and Grow Rich. It was like this weathered leather book, and he read that thing thousands of times. And so it really captured the theory of sort of the oneness and connectedness of the universe, and that we can tap into that and, manifest things through gratitude. So I bumped into her again a little while later. She's like, "What's the longest chapter?" I said, "Gratitude." And she kind of, twinkle in her eye. And I think the two big things I learned from her is, one, that it's about giving. It's not about all the self-focus. Like when I translate into sales in the book, I talk about, what about all the outcomes for your customers? Are you really obsessing on that? Are you visualizing like a far better transformed state for the product working, or are you trying to like hit your meeting quota or hit your number, right? Are you in the self and trying in sports of that? And number two is the word action is in attraction. So you have to really take massive action, because sales is a sport. But the whole purpose of this book is to have you fall in love with prospecting and fall in love with selling, essentially. And it can be a very like heart-centered spiritual thing to do, versus the very rejection dense, negative, flogging diamond mind thing. So yeah, so in 2006 I was somewhat getting into SaaS and tech. I'd done a lot of telemarketing and even sold shoes at Nordstrom, right? So it wasn't that much SaaS around though. So I ended up I was working in incubators, and I went up to San Francisco because my brother's at Google, and I tried to get a job. I was probably making like 45K, and for 3 months I tried to get a job, trying to use the secret, trying to use all this stuff, and I couldn't. I thought so, and then I got FedExed one offer for 45K, and my brother's like, "Well, you're not really qualified. Just take it, right?" And I was doing this process called musification. I was sitting there, I was listening to like solfeggio frequencies tuned to 432 hertz and 528 hertz, like the miracle tones, kind of calm my brain down. And I talk about it a lot in the book, because there's a ton of science behind it. And this thing called cymatics, like the impact of sound on water and waves on the brain to relax it. Essentially, at my wit's end, and my investors made some calls from this company, and they knew Joe Green working with Sean Parker, and I got this job at Causes, and I got a six-figure offer, double my income. And I was literally just sitting, in my apartment, visualizing doing this stuff. And then I remember I ripped up that offer letter for the same amount. I like refused the universe. And so when that came in, I got the call, and I was jumping for joy. It was truly a breakthrough, not only to, hit that earning milestone, because I was 31, so it was okay. But I mean, it was just the manifestation of what, you know, my desire, and persisting in that, and kind of using the music and manifestation process, because I couldn't meditate.
Mm.
And now looking back, I tell people, I was like, yeah, but I drink a lot of Starbucks too. So I had a lot of caffeine, which puts the brain in a beta state. And you can drink coffee, it's cool, but it's really good to like kind of come off it later at night and relax your brain and calm it down, because it goes from beta into alpha and theta, which are these really creative states between pure, focused consciousness and falling deeper into the subconscious axis of the mind. So I did find that the music could calm down my brain enough that I could finally visualize. And then, the point of this book is if you use music to do this, then all the other techniques work. Whether it's Silva mind control or affirmations, visualizations, I don't know, astral projection, it gets crazy. I mean, people do all sorts of stuff, right? But if you can't slow the brain down and tap into your deeper, fourth dimension spiritual place, it's a tough exercise with that loud, your thoughts going crazy. So
Mm.
you're a good listener, man. There's a lot.
You know, it reminds me of I have a vision playlist.
Nice.
And on my vision playlist, two of my favorite songs, one of which is Hell's Bells by AC/DC, and then the second one is Good Old Days by Macklemore.
Nice.
And oftentimes I'll, especially when I might be going through something, right? Might be doubting myself, might be just, in the trenches a little bit, getting some rejections, whatever it might be, losing sight of what it is I'm really trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Put my Bose headphones on and I'll put on those two songs and I'll remember and I'll feel the energy, the essence of my vision of like, hey, what am I really doing? And I'll just kind of like bathe in that field, and just like it, and maybe I might dance a little bit, whatever it might be, but it truly, I'm changing my state to remember what am I really doing here? And like kind of taps me back into it. And yeah, there's just so much power in the ability of actually going into that arena that most people just think it's too woo woo. It's like, what do you want me to, feel my heart more and tap into this like esoteric idea in terms of what I'm really trying to move into. But there's science that proves that you can change the physiology, the emotions, the psychology that you're experiencing through these different types of, waves and music like you speak to.
It's true, so Western music is tuned to A440 hertz, and that was an interesting choice of the world. And it tends to turn off the right hemisphere of the brain and even slow the pineal gland down. Now, it doesn't mean I don't rock some AC/DC, because sometimes I need the state change too. And I put on like Joe Satriani or Van Halen or some. I'm 44, so I lived through the 80s and 90s glory days, right? So if you're listening to music and you love it and you feel invigorated, then you are in this higher emotional frequency. But I use these special frequencies to slow down my brain. And then I had this client who had a traumatic brain injury from a car accident. He was using binaural beats and some of these frequencies just to be able to like cut the ADHD symptoms of his brain. It was helping him focus. So once I'm in that state, then I visualize my future as if it's real now, full 3D reality, and then I'm thankful for it. And I'll use affirmations, and it's sort of a blend of music, a meditative state, the I am statements, and then the real time visualization. And I found that if you just do this a few times a day, and then when you're not doing it, you can almost tap back into it. Um, and then, like, how do you do that while you're selling? And what are you going to visualize for? Not just outcomes for you as the seller, hitting the number, winning the ladder, being the best seller in your company, your industry. What about all the ways you could visualize positive things for the client? And that's why I love that Hawaiian mysticism process, Ho'oponopono, where it's like, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. And I love the clearing of the resentments, because we all call all day and we get stung by these angry callers and we resent them. And that puts like a lot of disturbance and noise and resistance in the quantum field. We're sitting around just like irritated. So it's really important, like when someone mistreats you, to be kind and have compassion, because like the whole idea is like you're this field, like this vortex, and the negative emotions and those intentions can stop you from, they can stop the flow essentially. So I don't know if a lot of salespeople try to stay in a zen state while they prospect, right, or while they're in a heavy negotiation or some element of sales, but it's powerful. It's something worth trying.
Well, I kind of want to dive deeper into that because, like I said earlier, the biggest thing that you and I really align on well is, hey, there's this whole inner game side to sales. Are you believing in your mission? Do you have a purpose? Do you feel your vision? And also, are you going in deep and working on your mental, emotional, spiritual parts of you? It's like, are you working to be in that state of zen, or as I like to call it, to be in your essence, right? Be an essence-led leader, feeling grounded, feeling safe, feeling open, feeling genuine, authentic. And on the other side of the equation, you got to learn how to crush a cold call. You
That's
got to
true.
learn how to open up and relate to a client and build expertise. You have to be able to ask powerful questions that get them into a powerful state of commitment. You need to be an expert, within your field. And I would love for you to just kind of touch on, because, you teach people a methodology around how to build pipeline and close business. Like, that's a key framework that you are ushering in.
Hmm.
And you're also doing it with this metaphysical idea that you speak to right there. And so I'd love for you to just kind of double tap into, what is that combination between the two?
Yeah, so you could think of it like, think of three circles, and the outside is doing, right? So we're prospecting, right? Now, what are we thinking while we're doing that? Is it negative? Is it positive? Do we limit our belief that we're going to be effective at the prospecting or calling the C levels? And then at the core is who we're being. So it's like being, thinking, and then doing. And I have that
Mm,
in the first book, Justin Michael Method. It's a series. What I find is that about 5% of your success in sales is your tactics and techniques. And we're all out here. We're like, Challenger, Spin, Gap, Miller, Hyman, and those are great. But I can change the outer shell of all your tactics and techniques. But if in your mind you're like, God, I don't think I can call a C level. I don't really know if I'm smart enough to do the 7-figure. Maybe I'll do a pilot. I don't really believe I'm a good seller, right? The being, the core. So, from the acorn, the oak, it's about shifting identity. And there was a book called, Psycho-Cybernetics, that talks about Maxwell Maltz, who was a plastic surgeon. People would have a bad scar and he'd remove it and they'd still operate as if they had the scar. So a salesperson subconsciously has a specific income down to, like, $100 of what they're going to earn. So, like, I'm coming in and I'm working on the self-confidence and the self-perception, and someone decides they're a 100K earner or a 50K earner, and changing this to, like, I'm a 200K earner, I could do 500K, so that they can cement in and sustain and crack through that upper limit problem, which is a term from Gay Hendricks. We kind of sabotage ourselves because it's our comfort zone and our ego to a certain earning amount, and that impacts sellers. There's even stories in that book where, a person's making $72,000, they go to another company, they crush it, they go up to like 150, and then they're back to 71,000 because it's just like the comfort zone. They sabotage themselves back down to the level that they're sitting at. So breaking through those limited beliefs is very powerful. As far as my methodology, I mean, that's kind of how I entered the scene. I went out in like 2017, 18 as part of a startup called Outbound Works, and we scaled up from 10 startups to 100 startups, and we ran their top of funnel. And so I've sent millions of emails and done experiments, and I've done 20,000 hours of cold calls because I came out of telemarketing. So I feel like, how is that even possible? I'm like, well, back in the day, we just had like folding chairs and phones. There weren't even computers. It was only call based. So I've built a neuroscience-backed methodology for top of funnel and outbound and full cycle in my series, and it's all about doing the opposite. It's about pattern interrupts, neuroscience, game theory, behavioral dynamics, right? Neurolinguistic programming, just game theory, everything you could think of. So, and the reason I came up with that is I really felt, as you go out and read all the books on the market, that there's tens of thousands of trainers and coaches, but they assume that someone already has the sale. Like the Challenger sale, you can kind of use it for the top funnel, but a lot of this is like, okay, you have the deal, and here's how you're going to qualify, do demos, progress it, negotiate, and close down the funnel. Then you get right up to the very top of the funnel, and you kind of have like Grant Cardone, and you've got Jeb Blunt, and you've got these different voices, and a lot of younger people coming out. And I was like, well, where's the rigorous set of techniques up here So I read every book, tried every system, tried every A/B test, and that's how I kind of generated the Justin Michael method. But then I started coaching and training teams 4 years ago, and like I couldn't get the results because the thoughts were broken, and the core, the identity, was not there.
Mm.
They did not feel worthy to talk to a C-level. Like, what am I going to? 22-year-old kids, like, what am I going to say to a C-level? And I remember being 27 and calling executive directors all day, and I said to my investors, I'm like, hey, like, how do I, like, should I wear a tie? Like, how do I get confident to talk to these people making a lot more money, a lot more experience? And he said to me, this guy, Eric Schrader, he said, how you speak adds 10 years.
Mm.
And it's really about acumen and understanding their business and being like, oriented around that, like those three archetypes I talk about in my work: the doctor, the detective, and the therapist. And I saw that in Jeff Toll's work as well. So the complete story is like, you can read my books at book 3, Attraction Selling, and then go back to the Justin Michael Method 1.0, Sales Superpowers, and then go to number 2, Justin Michael Method 2.0. And that gives you your mindset, the first shell. And then that then solves like the tactical elements of the shells. It's a great
Mm.
question. I've never really had it asked that way. So,
Well, it's every LinkedIn influencer out there is giving, hey, here's the 9 tips to do an effective cold call script. Hey, if you're, needing a negotiation framework, here's the exact thing. And they're unbelievably valuable. Yes. But if you're not coming from the right place with it, it's going to fall flat because it's just you're repeating something to make yourself sound like you know what you're talking about. And I remember when I was at Microsoft in my early 20s, early mid 20s, I grew my beard out and I
nice.
wore a suit and a tie to every single customer meeting. And I was working with CIOs, IT directors, all down the line, who had 20 years of experience, and I was a young punk directly out of college, and I was terrified that these guys would see right through me. And I actually, I still remember there's a couple of times where some of my clients asked me how old I was, and I lied. I straight up
Yeah,
lied.
that's
I was
funny.
terrified. I didn't want them to know I was a 24-year-old kid who actually was just trying to understand what the cloud even meant when they had, all this experience. And it's like, it took a level of actually going in, just like you said, and changing one's identity to say, hey, how do I actually meet this person where they're at and recognize that even if I don't have the number of years of experience, I'm still meant to be here. I provide a unique view in terms of how to tackle these problems that might be, fresh, that maybe I was, born and raised within this tech boom a little bit differently than they were born and raised in whatever boom that
Mm-hmm.
they were in.
Yeah,
But it takes that identity right there to
it does.
really say, hey, I'm worthy of this.
Well, we can look at the golden mean or Pareto. We could look at 80-20, and the statistics are different, but we can 80-20 anything. And we can say, well, right now, people listening to this, watching this, like 80% of what they're seeing is the body language and the tonality, right? And so if you just have a phone, then like 80% is just the tonality. And the percentages are all different and measured, but let's just assume, just to make it simpler. So if you're in a state of doubting your ability to sell, it comes across in your tone and your body language. So people are always seeking, like, what's the script? What's the pattern? Like, no, you got to change how you see yourself and how you believe in yourself and believe you can do the thing, right? If you think you can or can't, you're right. The Henry Ford quote. So I realized this kind of late in the game because I helped a lot of people with tonality and different things. And you give two people the identical script and one crushes it and the other doesn't. And then in my techniques, I did take it farther tactically. And I said, well, don't use scripts at all. Use frameworks, use formulas. And I call that heuristics, a word I took from engineering. And it's sort of the meta because, if you say thank you, that's a gratitude heuristic. Or if you ask for an opinion, there's an opinion heuristic. So I started creating formulas and frameworks that allowed reps to have like an infinite color palette so they could come up with their own scripts, call openers. And, I get into skirmishes around permission-based openers and this and that and the other thing, but you just nailed it. It's the deep, deep down who you believe you are. Sales is the transference of belief. And if you
Yes.
don't fully believe in yourself, and love your product and know that product can change their state, you're going to have interferences. It's going to be
Mm-hmm.
hard. It's going to be Sisyphean rolling that rock. So yeah, we're very aligned in this for sure.
It goes back to, are you just selling your product because you're trying to hit your quota and make money? because that's felt. Whether or not the prospect realizes it, they feel it. And, you know, I look back, one of the best selling periods I ever had in my entire life was 2018 through 2021-ish timeframe at Outreach. And I joined it when it was, had just turned Series C, about 200 employees or so. We were just starting to build out and segment out. I ended up moving to leadership at the SMB team.
Nice.
And there was such a deep belief in, man, we're changing the game of sales. Right. We were selling a sales engagement platform before sales engagement was like really well known. And it was, man, we're changing how, sales reps engage with clients. We're helping them to hit quota more, and therefore helping them to, make more money and serve their family more and have more time. Like, there was a meaning behind what we were doing. We felt a purpose behind it. And
Mm-hmm.
I truly, believe that, yes, the product was really great for sure, but there was a belief in the product and a belief in what the product was allowing the world to evolve into, that it just made everybody actually then have a deeper hunger to, hey, I need to learn how to become a better sales professional because I have this purpose, and I need to learn how to communicate more effectively, right? I need to, make sure that when it comes to how to compete against the competition, I need to make sure that I know how to communicate effectively why we're better, because if they don't choose us, I might not be able to help them the way that I know I'm trying to help them. And
Yeah.
it became such a greater purpose there.
So breaking into the spiritual side, and I thought my book would be very controversial, but we know from Eastern and Western philosophy that the essence of all right of life is like suffering. We all suffer, right? And the way out, I believe, is service. And so I think there's service-based selling and service-based prospecting in books like The Go-Giver, and even How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's everywhere, right? Zig Ziglar, like, you'll get everything you want in life if you help enough people get what they want. And so bringing that into that exact equation you had is starting to understand how this really transforms the business. So I worked for this inside Salesforce when I was there. I did like the Challenger Sales Boot Camp, and I met one of the top sellers ever, this guy, Tom Radel. He is a former NFL football player. And I sat with him in the lobby of the Hilton in the snowstorm. And I was like, what books do you read? He's like, Justin, you read too many books. And he later became a writer, but he says, I just sit down with the prospect and I look them in the eye and say, we're going to transform your business. But now I love that because it's so the essence of service, and the goal. It's not to make the sale, not to get the commission, not you to get paid. It's that customer to be like, they say at Salesforce, CFL, customers for life. They're just a raving, screaming fans. Like, yeah, we plugged this in. I got promoted. We got incredible ROI out of it. So that's how I approach coaching as well. Like, I work with one person at a time, and my goal is to give them a transformational experience. And I just throw everything I've got mentally, spiritually, and tactics wise at them until they have certain breakthroughs. So I really mentor people. I'm really like a performance business coach in that sense. And that's why this realm you play in is so critical now, because we have to deal with the mind and the heart and the trauma of people. Otherwise they'll block themselves. We both have
Mm-hmm.
our stories, right?
Yes. I love that story of, I just look at them in the eyes and I say, we're going to transform your business, because it's true.
Yeah.
And the way that I would describe that, and this is getting a little, well, we're already there. You're going into heart flow with somebody. You're like, hey, like, I feel you. Do you feel me? Like, we're going to do this. And when there's a genuineness, when my heart's actually open to like, be like, hey, like, I mean what I say, and I'm here for you. And like, I'm in deep presence with you right now, especially in today's world. Presence is the hardest thing to find, right? Because everybody is looking at 18 different apps or getting ready for their next meeting, or whatever it might be. But when you can actually be in presence both with yourself as well as on the other person, it's a differentiator. It's crazy how much of a differentiator it is.
It's so true. Yeah. You have to be fully there, and we live in this multitasking world, and you have to listen for deep insight and do proactive listening. It's really powerful. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm feeling what you're putting down for sure.
So let me ask you this, and I've been asking a lot of people this, because yes, it's the classic statement, times are changing. We're in this huge inflection point. We're in a renaissance. There's a new world that's coming through when you combine AI, when you combine crypto, all this sort of stuff. But, I recently saw this thing of just like the evolution of sales. And I saw a stat that said the fax machine was breakthrough technology at the beginning of the century. It's like around 2000, the fax machine was still, very much a core part of what we were doing and how we were doing business. And it's just been changing so much every 2 to 3 years. When you think about what a new sales rep who just joined the workforce, or someone who's been in it for a second, or someone who is now in a leadership role and is having to train a sales team, what is it evolving into? What's actually really important that people need to be, focused on and learning?
Yeah, so I really think that, acumen and um, any method that is a root cause analysis based method, whether that's SPIN, the implication and need payoff, whether that's Sandler pain funnels, whether that's Challenger, Miller Hyman, any element of the diagnostic business development to understand, so David C. Baker from The Business of Expertise, amazing book. He talks about the jar. The client or the customer, the prospect is in a jar, and there's a label, and they can't read the label, but you're outside the jar, and you can read the label. And you, as a sales professional, have asynchronous information, right? Which comes from VCs. Like, they look at all the mobile companies so they can see the trends. So if you meet with all the IT leaders or HR leaders or, CHROs, you have special intel of many jars and many labels. And so your goal is to help them see what's on the label, get out of their own way, right? And it's about the iceberg theory. It's about peeling the onion. It's the deeper conversations, because whether I'm working with the top funnel team of SDRs, they're so focused on just getting to the meeting. And I've even had SDRs say, like, we're not allowed to do any discovery. Like, we're just like, that's for the AEs. They just throw it over the wall, unqualified. And then I work with AEs a lot too, and they're not really adept at getting into the deeper problems, because, prospects never have problems, they have symptoms. And it's up to us to dig in and peel back into what's really going on. So there's almost like an understanding of psychology and therapy and behaviors, and being able to, ask questions in a very interesting way and listen and lead conversations. And so that stuff's not taught. You can read it in a book, but it takes practice. And that's why Hard Skills Exchange is so important, right? Because we have this one-to-one coaching platform where that's really the modus operandi, is you sit with real world folks and drill and rehearse and do stuff. It's a sport, and we're practicing on our clients and our prospects, which is sales malpractice. Contact rates are so low, so hard to actually even see or talk to a customer. So, like, you need at bats so you can learn this thing, so you can fall and learn how to snowboard, fall a lot of times.
Mm. What do you get most worried about when it comes to sales as the world continues to evolve the way it is?
Well, I think there's obviously an over reliance on tooling, shiny object syndrome. We definitely have bad actors out there who are spamming. They're excited, like, oh, I have 25 email addresses doing 500 a day. Like, I can still do volume, right? You hear this all the time. And I won't tell you the vendors that enable that, but in a way, it's creating more of the problem, right? The other element is, like, the cold calls are going crazy with all these robo dialers and, parallel assisted dialers. So I think my biggest worry and concern is all salespeople, you need to be egalitarian. They need to be trained on full cycle, the whole thing. It's like, oh, they're young, they just came out of college, like, we'll just start them off, on the top track. There's just set meetings. And then you talk to, they haven't read books, they haven't had training, they're like, oh, I'm not a closer, I don't know how to be an AE. It's like, no, like Ian Arino says, like, the first close is commitment for time. If you could do that, then you can, it's like, when I coach and train people, always, I would train the SDR teams on advanced full cycle strategic selling, like Tony did for me, Tony Hughes and the Joshua principle. So that's, like, I think that's the big gap. It's a wider subject matter, and I think you're really robbing people of a transformational experience to only, it's like, we're going to play basketball, but all you're going to do is, like, work on dribbling. We're going to do
Hmm.
shots or like defense or passing. Just like, it's like we've over moneyballed this thing to the point where we're cutting out. There might be a unique genius. If you let them play all the positions, you might find out, wow, they're really good at, math and data analysis. So we kind of waste people by pigeonholing them into this SDR AE industrial complex modality, and
Mm.
it limits their growth. How about you?
It's a good question, and it's funny because I had Mark Koskelo on my podcast last week, and one of the things he talked about was the need for more specialization. So actually, even of the SDR position, having an SDR who does emails only, having an SDR who does calls only, having an SDR who does social only. Whereas you're on the opposite side of the spectrum, where you're actually saying no, it needs to be more. Everybody needs to be doing everything.
Yeah,
I,
because I think that's all going to become more automated. Like I see tools like clay.com, and that's a very steep learning curve, but that will ultimately go codeless. And we're going to have more and more full automation at the top. It's going to be like, swipe right, swipe left, and the buyer and seller will be AI. And then so the human will go lower down in the funnel in the supply chain. And so those humans are going to need to know consultative sales, empathy, scoping, solutioning, maybe sales engineering elements of really how to really construct a solution collaboratively.
mm-hmm.
I've written a lot of stuff that's probably conflicting and contradicts itself on this, because obviously I wrote Tech Powered Sales and it's very much in line with what Costaglo is saying. You know what I mean? He endorsed that. But like you could have a rep that you highly specialize and subspecialize and consolidate the stack into is doing one thing, but I think it's still good to give that rep training across the other positions, like rotational training, so that they at least really understand their customer in the supply chain. So if you're an SDR and you hand off to the AE, understand the AE's world will make you better at a customer centric go to market motion, versus now, right, where the SDR asks you like 20 interrogation questions, and you get handed the AE and they're like, I looked at the notes kind of, and then they interrogate you all over again. And then just this customer is just so burned out, like a sausage grinder. You know what I mean?
I think the biggest risk that we have to sales is people think that technology is going to do the job for us.
Mm-hmm.
And technology is not meant to replace that human to human connection. And I think many people know that and think that, yet we're continuously finding ways. One of my buddies, showed me Outreach now, and Outreach has the ability to automatically, using AI, create that follow-up email based on the call that was recorded right there. Boom, shoot it off. Really efficient, really powerful, and that's awesome. But what AI can't replace, at least up to this point, is, hey, you need to truly connect with someone to actually be effective in sales. You need to have those authentic, vulnerable, raw conversations that, might be hard, but you can't script that thing out. You can't have AI tell you what the answer is that you need to do. Sure, it can advise you as here's a perspective, but at the end of the day, we have this, powerful computer within our bodies called our heart that tells us when things are off or tells us when things click. And we actually have an opportunity now more than ever to drop into that, because all of these, basic tasks that we're doing, is being taken over by AI. Awesome. What's that allowing us to do now? We can focus on our consciousness. We can focus on our development and going more in and finding what actually is that greater thing that we need to be doing. And, I get really excited. It's like, people are always like, man, what's 20 years from now going to be like? My question is like, yo, dude, what's 5 years from now going to look like? 20 years is going to be a completely different, everything. But 5 years from now actually is going to be completely different. And so, yeah, I think we're actually given more of an opportunity to drop into our hearts as sales professionals and as sales leaders.
Well, like Larry Levine wrote Selling from the Heart. That's a good title. It's a good place to go. And like you can be heart-centered in this, and then you get this enormous amount of rejection, or there's internal politics in your job, or someone's like really, you have a toxic boss, or you're getting prevented. But, it's just like Star Wars. I mean, love is more powerful than hate. And I tell people you got to be a gentle giant. You got to work on your negative self-talk and actually, it's working less and getting rest and holistically taking care of yourself because the brain is stronger then. And so it's all just counterintuitive. It's all a series of paradoxes. It's like you slow down to speed up. You do something unscalable to scale. And that humanism of just being with a person. You're in direct messages, you slow down and just, you don't think like, oh, how can I automate my DM right now? And oh, look, I fooled them. No, like have a human conversation. Here you are. Here's your at bat. Be human, be authentic, try to help them, try to understand them. Right. So it's so funny, the automation pill. It's like, at every turn we're just trying to put a robot on it. Like it's like, yeah, the robot can do my laundry and wash my dishes now, awesome, it can also sell for me. But it's like all the gold is in that conversation. Every sale's in that conversation, which,
Yes.
Steve Chandler says that, but I love that quote. So simple. That's the key to everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now that our laundry's getting done and now that all this stuff's getting done, then what are you going to do? What do we know how to do?
It's the value of the human, you know what I mean? So yeah,
Yeah.
and so that work will get handed off more and more to machines, but we will be there for, creativity, solutions, love, empathy, and making someone feel safe about their choice, right? Guiding and leading them. If you look at the research coming out of the Jolt effect, right, and that whole FOMO versus FOMO, fear of missing out versus fear of messing up, and just that leadership, there's so many solutions, thousands, and it's like you're like the curator of the solutions that can share the use cases and that can make them feel comfortable with the behavioral change to make this technology decision.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've got one more question here for you, Justin. And before I dive into the question, I just want to say thank you and acknowledge you, man, for the fact that you are not just believing in this, but you're actually spreading this message, right? One of the things you talk about a lot in your book and just through your work is service. And you have been learning so much about this yourself, but you're providing it and giving it to more people. And you're part of this massive transformation. You're not one who's just saying, hey, man, we're all screwed. This whole thing's happening. You're saying, you're taking a stand and you're saying, hey, this is the way that we need to go. So just to acknowledge and thank you for that. And, my question for you is this, and this is how we always end each one of our podcasts. It's one of my favorite questions. The show is obviously called the Rising Leader Podcast. My question for you is, what do you view as the rising leader?
Yeah, I think like we're going to need to raise the consciousness and, combining, the head and the heart, right? In these two areas of the human being. And I think becoming interested in your inner game and realizing that over 80% of success in this craft is going to be you mastering yourself, your thoughts, your self-talk, your self-perception. And once you do that, you realize that everything is one, and the people that you're trying to close and transact and convince are just reflections of you on the screen of life. So if you want to fix an outside problem past your eyes, you need to fix an inside problem. So just delving deeper into the quantum mechanics and the ideas of like as above, so below, and as within, so without. It's a fractal, it's a hologram. It's like you're thinking like, I'm going to go do a deal. What are all the strategies and plans and tactics, right? It's like, and you wouldn't think that go meditate on it, right? And so you still have to take action, but you have to get your mind right. So yeah, I think his name is David Bayer, but his theory of the whole universe is that it's desire plus non-resistance equals desired outcome. And the previous thing is like the leaders of the past is we set this huge goal. We're going to hit 5 million ARR. Okay, we got 10 people, fire 2. It's force, it's militant, right? And it's really thinking about, well, how can we do something transformational with the product roadmap? And how can we go to the existing customers, make sure they're really happy because 80% of the revenue is going to come from them, and just working together as a team from a holistic perspective. Yeah, I think we nailed it with that. I've been on 13 sales teams and I've never heard any woo-woo stuff. I had one manager, his name was Jim Mangello, and he would say, visualize the goal, plant the seed. No, he said, visualize the goal, germinate the seed, and plan for success. And now I think that's pretty darn metaphysical if you think about it.
He knows what he's talking about. He's ahead of his time.
Yeah.
Well, Justin, man, I appreciate that. And that was a phenomenal last answer there for you. If anybody wanted to get a hold of you or chat with you or dive deeper into your work, what is the best way to do so?
Yeah, so I've put out a trilogy of books called the Justin Michael Method series. They're on Amazon and they're Justin Michael, or you can follow me on LinkedIn, and I would be honored to get feedback and a review if inspired. But really take these and apply them. It's based on hundreds of coaching sessions, and 99% of people will never hire me. So these are just kind of my gifts to you. Go find this stuff and make it your own. It'll work.
Well said, my friend. Well, I appreciate you being on here. And for all those who dropped in with us, thank you so much as always. And make sure you send this to somebody who you know needs to hear it. So thanks, Justin.
I'm grateful. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Rising Leader podcast. Make sure you hit that follow button so you get notified every time a new episode releases. If you know someone who wants to take their lives and their career to the next level, send them this episode so we can all rise together. For more information, check out alluviance.co. We'll see you next time. And in the meantime, keep letting it flow.